Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Welcome to part 3 of working on my northern mixed bog forest. Today I'm going to be working on the landscape. Here's a look at the forest floor. So I have a lot of weeds in here, and some of them are good. Some of them look scale and miniature. Other ones are like that Irish moss here that I'll need to pull out, and also some liverwort. So I'll be doing that today. I'll also be re-establishing my deer trails through the forest here, pruning it up so you can see the actual path. On the forest floor, I have a lot of needles from the trees when I was pruning them, so I'll have to clean all those up too. I mentioned in the last video that I wanted to plant some little tiny miniature flowers to really give this landscape a spring-like feeling. So I was out at the garden center this morning. I went to 2 garden centers and I looked all around, and I did find some nice kind of compact ground cover. It's called Alyssum. Here is a look at the Alyssum I bought. I bought 2 of them. One is clear crystal white and the other is Wonderland Blue. That's the color of the flowers. I'll show you a close-up of one of the flowers that's on the plant already. Here's a look at the Wonderland Blue flower, and you can see how small it is compared to my finger. They're very tiny, and there's flower buds all over the plant. The Alyssum is an annual plant, so it can't take the cold of winter, so it'll die out, which is really good in a landscape like this. You don't want a hardy ground cover spreading throughout, taking over the moss and becoming a real problem. So I'm kind of glad it's an annual, so it'll die back. Then I can replant it every spring. It's fairly large. You can see the size of the leaves, but I think it'll work as kind of little bushes throughout the forest. I hope so anyway. You can also prune it. It'll flower all summer, so it starts growing long and kind of trailing. You can prune it back and then it'll start reflowering once again. So I looked at hundreds of different ground covers in the greenhouse, and there's a lot of really nice ones, but the problem is I need them flowering for the Toronto show. It's no good if they flower a week later or a week earlier. I need them in flower for the show. So these are just coming out into flower now, and I think the flowers will last long enough that at the Toronto show I'll have spring flowers in the planting, which will be a nice little touch, I think. The other plant that I thought might work is the cotoneaster. I could plant it as little bushes, keep them pruned, and my cotoneaster over here is flowering right now. I'll show you that. Here is a look at the cotoneaster. So you can see there's little kind of reddish pink flowers coming out now all over. They're not out yet, so you can just see a little hint of their color right now. But, you know, this has been in the greenhouse just like my bog forest, so the timing for this particular show might be about right. That's one disadvantage with plants that flower once a year, is that to get the timing right to match the flowers opening with a bonsai show is almost impossible, because the bonsai show, the date can change every year. And the conditions in the greenhouse here might change also. We had a warm winter this year, so next year maybe the flower buds won't be opening this time of year. So I think the Alyssum is the better choice because they flower almost continuously the whole summer. So they're just starting to flower now, so I'm hoping they're in flower for the show, and then they keep flowering, you know, for most of the summer. You may notice beside the Alyssums is a new plant, a Haworthia. And the reason I got this is not because I want more plants and trees, is that in my desert rose forest, my Socotra Island planting, I had one of the desert roses die over the winter. It just shriveled up and died. And I thought this would be an interesting plant to replace it with. I could prune off the lower leaves and kind of get a bit more of a tree form to it and plant that in the desert rose's place. I'll plant the Alyssums as the last step today. I'm going to start today with the exciting task of weeding. Here's a look at the forest floor, and The weeds with the leaves here, these are the ones I'm going to keep. They're small and miniature looking. They add variety to the moss. Hopefully they'll stay small for the Toronto show. I do, however, want to get this liverwort out. You can see there's a piece of it there. Some more here. So I'm just going to go through the forest, get rid of all my liverwort that's growing. And if I miss one or two, it's no big deal. It doesn't look out of scale or anything. It just looks like some kind of, another kind of ground cover. But I don't want it spreading if I can avoid it. It's hard to get out of plantings. And once it starts growing with vigor, it looks horrible. It takes over even the moss. The other weed I want to get out is this, I don't know, they call it Irish moss or starweed. This stuff, it gets really deep roots, it spreads. It's quite attractive looking. It just, it takes over your bonsai landscape. And the roots get a thick mat of roots, and it's hard to water your trees. So it's best to get rid of it and just use regular moss. Even though, it looks beautiful, it flowers and everything, but it's just hard to deal with in a bonsai pot. I think the weeding will take me about half an hour, so we'll come back when it's all done. As I'm weeding here, I'm also cleaning up the needles from the spruce and the larch that are all on the forest floor. And if there's moss growing up the trunks of the trees, I'll pick that away too. Might as well do everything at once. I'm also going to prune away any of these weeds that are close to the edge of the pot. I don't want them overhanging the lip of the pot. And any that have leaves that are too large. So I'll keep all my small leaf weeds and any of the ones that are getting a bit too big, like there's some back here that are just getting too tall and too large. They're starting to look a bit out of place in the forest. So I'll pull those out, and I'm sure there'll be others grow in to replace them to kind of continue that, that variation of the forest floor. It's looking very natural right now. And again, I always find that as you clean up these landscapes, the more things you notice out of place, the more needles you find, the more weeds you see. As it becomes more and more miniature looking, you start looking at the landscape with a more critical eye. I guess because it increases the realism, and you start to notice things that look out of place. It's raining outside again. This will be the third day in a row, and the forecast says it is supposed to rain for the next 4 days. I'm thinking I have deer trails through this section of the forest. 2 trails converge here and disappear off in the background. I may bring this trail around the front here and have it go off in between these trees. When I was visiting the real life bog, I noticed there was a lot of deer trails through the forest, and I think it would be more realistic to have a few more in these trees here. So I think I'll try that and see how it looks. You know how I said this weeding might take me half an hour? I'm thinking it's going to take me a lot longer, because there's so many needles to pull out here that have fallen down, and there's so many tiny little weeds in here that each section of the forest has taken me a long time. These little weeds in here really add another dimension to the forest floor. It's quite amazing actually how good they look. So I really enjoy this kind of work, and I think it's because you're directly rewarded. Once you get your forest floor looking really realistic and miniature, And it just drives you to keep going and make it better and better. Because you see the results right away and how much more realistic it looks. It just, I don't know, I can imagine myself walking through here right now. It's just a beautiful little trail there between the trees. Now I might have to get my brush out and just kind of brush around to get some of the needles out. That seems to work quite well. Kind of flicks them out. I finished weeding the entire forest. It took a long time. It took at least an hour and a half. I picked out a lot of the needles off the forest floor, but there's still a lot in there. I'd say maybe I'm 80% done. So next, I'm going to work on the deer paths. I have the one path coming in here, and it disappears out the back. The other one comes in here and snakes along and disappears out the back, so they join together. And I was thinking this one, maybe I could wrap it around and bring it out this way, kind of between these trees. So I'm going to pull out some of the moss from the front here. So I won't have the full path out front here, but just the suggestion that it keeps going. So you'll see the edge of it, this edge will continue along the front. I think that'll look quite nice. So there's where I continue it along here. I think over here there's kind of a natural line here that I like. If I couldn't find any small flowers for this planting, I was going to go and look for some different colored mosses, like maybe some silvery moss, some blue moss, something like that, like moss with a bluish tinge. There are some, quite colorful varieties of moss. There's even some reddish colored moss that I've seen in the bog forests. So yeah, you can get different colors of moss, and that would have looked quite nice, I think. Instead of flowers, it'd, just be some variety in the moss that would kind of make it look more spring-like, I think. A little more colorful, maybe. Okay. I'm liking that. Now I need to continue this path. It's kind of overgrown. You can't really see what's going on there. So I'm defining the path here. So it starts at the front of the pot and then joins and then comes around the back. And I don't want to end my path at the edge of the pot back here. I want it to go around the corner and disappear. That way, in your imagination, you just envision that that path goes on forever, that it doesn't end. It goes off into the forest. If you show the end of it back here, it makes the path look short. You can see the beginning and the end. This way you can only see the beginning at the edge of the pot, but it just disappears around the corner here and goes off into the deep woods somewhere. That's the idea anyway, or what I'm trying to convey. That's why I'm not showing the end of the path, just going off the edge of the pot here. And it allows you force perspective too. The path gets thinner and thinner as it disappears in the distance. So here's the path I created right here. This is the one part of it, disappears off in the distance. There's another entrance here to the pathway. It goes around the front and then it disappears off in the distance over the hill here. So I dug out a lot of weeds and there's kind of holes there, so I need to fill it in with some sand. So I'll do that next. I've got my sand here. It's just washed playground sand. You can buy it at the hardware store. And I have my special long-handled golden spoon that Tom sent me. So I will begin adding sand to the pathways, to the deer paths, building them up a bit, defining them a bit. Oh, here comes the rain again. almost sounds like the name of a song, doesn't it? So I hope you can see the path more clearly now with the sand. Kind of defines it from the rest of the forest. Right now it kind of looks like dirt bike trails or mountain bike trails. But once I add the water, wash it kind of in, it'll blend in and look a little more natural. It'll disappear a bit. I'm ready to water the sand now, kind of blending it in with the landscape more so it doesn't stick out quite so much. So here I go. I could just stick the whole planting outside with the rain coming down. Okay. Well, that looks much better. That looks kind of very nice, in fact. So that is hail coming down, or ice pellets. My goodness. I'm glad I'm not out in it. Let's just see how the trees are doing outside. Oh my goodness, look at that. They're getting bombarded. Oh, it's cold outside too. Wow, they're really getting bombarded with the hail. I sure get to observe the weather here in the greenhouse. You get to see a bit of everything out here. Snow, hail, sleet, rain, cloudy days, sunny days. Wow. The ice pellets are stopping now. It was a little hard to do a video when you've got ice pellets raining down on the glass here. It was very, very noisy. Rain is pleasant in the greenhouse here, but ice pellets aren't. Let's fly in now and have a look at the forest. Check out those pathways. So they're a little obvious at the moment, but I think in the 2 weeks they'll fill in just right, so they're kind of, you know, visible but not too obvious. Right now they're a little obvious. But it sure looks good though. It really adds to the landscape. Kind of makes you want to go on an adventure walking through the forest. Which is one of the things I like about pathways is it's like an invitation to you. Saying, come on, explore the forest. I've got a nice pathway here. So I still have to add the flowering plants. So I'll do that next. I'm checking out these flowers with the planting. They're fairly big, but not ridiculous. They would look like large ferns or something. And I'm hoping with some pruning in that I can kind of bonsai them, keep them small, compact, and try and get them to flower. That's a tall order. However, you know, you never know until you try, do you? So, I think I would like a clump of flowers over here, maybe some in the middle here, maybe some here, and some on the end. I've got my tray out. I'm all ready to begin the work on the alyssum, so I will pull it out of the pot. Will I? I won't pull it out of the pot. I'll try and get it out of the pot. There. Okay, so there's the roots. They're very, very fine, which means I won't be raking out the soil or anything. They're too fine and delicate. So I will be planting this sort of like a plug. So I'll just kind of scrape off the excess soil, which there's lots of. I will be trimming the roots because I don't want it that deep. Like that. And I'll be pruning this plug back to here. Wow, that's severe pruning. So there's 3 plants in there. So I'll plant that as a plug in the forest. I'm going to plant the first one right up front here. It's closest to the viewer, so you know the bigger plants will be in the front and they'll diminish towards the back. So I'll have to dig out kind of a plug. There's what it would look like. Yeah. I don't know if it'll look right or not, but again, I'm going to try it. See how it looks. And if I don't like it, I just pull it out and use it in something else. Maybe accent plants or something, you know. Because the forest looks quite nice now. It's very interesting. I just would like a little touch of spring color in it. Okay, there's my plug. Now, is there any front? I don't want the 3 plants facing the viewer. I want them on an angle. This is the largest one. I'll kind of put that up. Well, put it more in line with the 2 pathways, like that. I'm just going to add a bit of moss back around that soil from the Elysium. Okay, I'm going to step back and have a look at it, see if I like it or not. Here is a look at the planting. It's quite large. I think, you know, these weeds here are about the right scale for a large kind of plant in the forest. I think these are too big. It's unfortunate, but they're just too large. If I were to prune them back, I could do that, and then maybe, you know, it'd have new growth and might flower for the show. Maybe. It's a tough one. I think they're definitely too large the way they are. I'm going to prune them up and see what happens. I'll prune them back quite short, taking, you know, most of the top off them. I think even the leaf sizes just getting a bit big. I'm having another look. I think it spoils the scale. It's too big, the leaf size. I imagine, you know, a person to be in this forest maybe up to this bottom branch, maybe that high, and a leaf that size would be like tropical jungle size. It looks out of place in here. So I think I'm going to pull the plug on it. It looked fine without it. It just would have been nice to have some spring flowers. So I will have to use them as the accent plant. So I'll have to have an accompaniment plant beside the forest with these in flower. I think that's what I'll do. I think that's a good compromise. I think they're just too large a leaf. If it was a tropical jungle, fine, but it's just out of scale for this kind of miniature northern bog forest. I'm going to pull them out. I will keep my eyes open at the nurseries closer to showtime, and if I find something that's in flower, miniature tiny flowers, before the show, I can use that. I can plant it just before the show, so it's in flower for the show. There's nothing worse, I think, in a planting than, you know, having, I've seen it many times, you have all these super miniature trees and that, and then you have some element in it that doesn't match the rest. You'll have like a giant house in the background or something, or a bridge, and then something in it out of scale. So I've seen, you know, trees with little tiny people beside it, and if it was in real life, that tree would be like a science fiction tree. It would be too large. So I always, I'm very, try and always get everything to match in scale. That it's not, you don't have elements in your forest that are just too big or too small or too colorful or Everything has got to blend together to look like nature. A bit of trial and error with the flowering plants. I tried and I erred. It didn't work out. So that's fine. That's how you learn. I'm going to get the stand out now and we'll take a final look at my northern mixed bog forest. In one of the videos on this forest, I tried out my two different stands that would fit this pot underneath it. The oak stand here and also the maple stand. And in real life, I like the maple stand better. But then I was watching the video and I kind of like the oak stand better. So they both look good. So I'm not sure which one I'll show the tree on. One of the two, that's for sure. But yeah, I think it looks quite nice on the oak stand here. The oak stand is nice. It's a nice simple stand. It's not too heavy looking. The other one, the maple stand, is a little heavier looking, but it's also a little smaller. So yeah, it's very interesting. So that's the forest. It's looking good, I think. It's come a long way in this series, this 3-part series. It's got 2 weeks, or just under 2 weeks before the show, so there should be a few more changes to the forest. The moss might grow into those pathways a little. I might get some new growth on the trees. So I'll just have to keep my eyes on it, keep it maintained before the show. But that's a lot of work, these forests. It's a lot of work getting them ready. And it's all ready for the show. So that's one thing I can cross off the list. I noticed on the Haworthia that there is a new flower bud forming right here. So that's exciting. You can see the spent one, the flower up here. It's probably making seeds right now, which is exciting too. Yeah, so it'll be fun planting that in that desert rose landscape. I think it'll fit right in. I'm going to check the weather report, and if it looks like it's above freezing for the rest of this week, I'm going to move all my hardy trees out of the greenhouse here and begin moving the tropicals from the plant room in the basement into the glass greenhouse. So that'll be exciting. I'll do that tomorrow if the weather looks good. Every aspect of this forest is documented on my YouTube channel. I'll put a link to the playlist in the description below, so you can go back, watch the very first video on this forest, where it was just a bunch of trees and pots, and go through the entire process of how I made this forest and pruned it up, and every step of the way. Even I find it quite interesting because this forest has really progressed well. That is all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.